Before dawn on a cold morning in 1969, a U.S. Army radio operator logged a transmission that was never supposed to exist, a calm male voice repeating a single sentence over an encrypted channel that had been dead for hours. "The mountain heard us first." Within minutes, the signal vanished, the log was sealed, and 6 soldiers assigned to Mount Shasta were officially marked as never deployed, yet their footprints were already frozen into the upper slopes of a mountain locals had warned the Army to leave alone. The mission briefing had been brief by design: a red circle on a map, a list of equipment known to fail in the area, and an order that avoided specifics: investigate and contain, words that meant nothing and everything at the same time. Because Mount Shasta was not new to the military, it was simply never acknowledged, a place where radios bled voices from nowhere, where compasses spun like they were confused by something alive, and where pilots reported lights rising from the rock itself before their instruments went blind. As the 6-man reconnaissance unit began their ascent, the forest closed in unnaturally, sound dampened as if absorbed by the trees, and the air carried a low vibration that could be felt through bone rather than heard, a sensation Sergeant Daniel Crowe noted in his field journal before the pages abruptly stopped. By midday, thermal scanners showed organized movement beneath solid stone, too precise to be magma, too deliberate to be wildlife, and when the team attempted to relay this to command, their transmission returned to them seconds later, altered, delayed, and spoken back in a voice that was not their own. One soldier claimed the mountain was responding to their presence. Another swore he saw light spilling from a vertical crack that did not exist on any map, and a third refused to continue after hearing his name whispered from inside the rock, a name only his mother used. As night fell, the terrain behind them no longer matched the path they had taken. Trees stood where open ground had been, and the sense of being observed grew so intense that rifles were raised at shadows that never resolved into shapes. The final message, fragmented and shaking, broke through the static just once. "We are not exploring the mountain. We are being examined by it." And then Mount Shasta went silent, swallowing the unit, the evidence, and the truth, leaving behind a classified absence so complete that even today the question remains unanswered. What was buried inside that mountain long before the Army ever climbed it? And why did it decide that 6 soldiers would never be allowed to leave? As night fully settled over Mount Shasta, the 6 soldiers realized that remaining on the surface was no longer an option, because every attempt to retrace their steps only brought them back to the same narrow clearing, as if the mountain itself had folded the terrain inward, guiding them toward a single point they had not chosen. Sergeant Daniel Crowe ordered a temporary halt and instructed the team to switch to short-range comms only. But even those channels bled with low murmurs that rose and fell in rhythm with the vibration beneath their boots, a vibration that now felt less like geological activity and more like controlled movement. It was Private Lewis who first discovered the opening, a vertical fracture in the rock face partially hidden by snow and dead brush, exhaling warm air that carried a metallic smell and a faint echoing resonance, like distant machinery operating far below ground. When thermal imaging revealed a descending cavity extending hundreds of feet into the mountain, with multiple heat sources moving slowly along its walls, the unit faced a decision that no training manual had prepared them for: stay above and wait for an extraction that no longer responded, or descend into an environment that actively appeared to be drawing them in. Against every instinct, Crowe chose descent, noting in his recorder that whatever was interfering with their equipment was strongest on the surface, as if the mountain wanted them inside rather than escaping. As they lowered themselves deeper using climbing lines, the walls around them shifted from rough stone to unnaturally smooth surfaces etched with shallow geometric patterns that did not resemble erosion or human tools, patterns that seemed to rearrange subtly when viewed from different angles, causing dizziness and brief memory lapses among the men. At approximately 400 feet below the surface, their watches desynchronized simultaneously, some jumping forward by minutes, others freezing entirely, while the hum intensified into a steady pulse that matched known mechanical frequency. Voices became clearer at this depth, no longer fragmented, no longer random, but deliberate, repeating phrases that mirrored the soldiers' own earlier conversations, played back in distorted tones, as if the mountain had been listening and learning. Corporal Hayes reported seeing a corridor branching off to the left that did not appear on thermal scans, yet felt undeniably real when he stepped toward it, disappearing from view for several seconds before re-emerging pale and shaking, insisting he had seen a vast chamber lit from within by a dull amber glow and populated by towering silhouettes standing motionless like sentinels. As the unit pressed on, the tunnel widened into a massive hollow space where the floor sloped downward into darkness and the walls curved inward like the inside of a rib cage, amplifying sound and thought alike, so that fear itself seemed to echo. In the center of the chamber stood a structure that could only be described as intentional, a ring of black stone rising from the ground without seams or joints, warm to the touch and faintly vibrating, while symbols similar to those on the tunnel walls rotated slowly across its surface as if projected from within the rock. When Crow approached the structure, his radio activated on its own and transmitted a clear signal back to command for the first time since sunset, but the voice that came through was not the officer they recognized. It was Crow's own voice, calmly stating that the mission was complete and containment was achieved, even as Crow stood frozen, insisting he had not spoken. Panic spread as the soldiers realized the mountain was not merely responding to them. It was recording them, imitating them, and possibly replacing them. And when Private Lewis screamed that something was moving beneath the stone ring, the ground trembled violently, knocking the unit off balance and extinguishing all artificial light at once. In total darkness, surrounded by the sound of stone grinding against stone and a presence that felt vast, patient, and aware, Sergeant Crow made the last clear decision of his command, ordering a full withdrawal from the chamber, unaware that whatever lived beneath Mount Shasta had already decided that none of them would be leaving as the same men who had entered. The retreat from the chamber collapsed into chaos almost immediately, because the tunnel they had descended through no longer led upward in any recognizable way, instead stretching horizontally into a narrowing passage that pulsed faintly with the same amber glow Crow had seen reflected in Corporal Hayes' eyes moments earlier, and with every step the air grew denser, heavier, carrying the unmistakable sensation of pressure not on the body, but on the mind, as if thoughts themselves were being weighed and sorted. The soldiers began to experience fragmented memories that did not belong to them, flashes of places they had never visited and conversations they had never had, yet which felt intimately personal, causing Private Lewis to drop to his knees and beg for voices only he could hear to stop speaking in his mother's tone. Sergeant Crow attempted to maintain formation, but distances warped unpredictably, a man 5 feet away appearing suddenly much farther or closer than physics allowed, while the walls subtly reshaped themselves, closing off routes and opening others with smooth, silent motion that confirmed this was no natural cave system. When the humming deepened into a resonant vibration that rattled their teeth, the entity finally revealed itself, not as a physical form stepping into view, but as a presence that filled the passage entirely, manifesting through synchronized sound, light, and intrusive thought, addressing the unit not in words spoken aloud, but in meaning directly imposed on their minds. It conveyed awareness of humanity that stretched back centuries, referencing miners, shamans, and soldiers alike as temporary disturbances that came and went, and it made clear that Mount Shasta was not a shelter or a prison, but an interface, a listening structure built into the planet itself long before human history began. The entity showed them visions of previous contacts, individuals who had been allowed to leave altered. The remaining soldiers emerged from Mount Shasta just before dawn, disoriented, injured, and fundamentally changed in ways none of them could immediately articulate, finding the forest restored to its original layout, as if the mountain had never folded reality around them at all. Yet the silence that greeted them felt intentional rather than natural, a quiet that suggested observation rather than absence. Extraction arrived within minutes, far faster than any delayed response would have allowed, confirming that command had been monitoring something far more precise than radio signals, and the men were transported to a secure medical facility where every aspect of their debriefings was controlled, recorded, and selectively erased. Official reports listed the mission as aborted due to seismic instability. Corporal Hayes was declared never deployed, and Sergeant Daniel Crow's field journal was confiscated and replaced with a version he did not remember writing, one that described a routine reconnaissance with no anomalies. Over the following weeks, each surviving soldier exhibited subtle but escalating symptoms, shared dreams of underground chambers and rotating symbols, involuntary speech in unfamiliar phonetic patterns, and an overwhelming compulsion to return to high places, particularly volcanic or mountainous terrain, as if proximity to geological mass strengthened something inside them. Two were quietly reassigned to deep-sea research units. One disappeared during transit, and another suffered a fatal training accident after attempting to access restricted seismic data, leaving Crow as the only survivor who retained enough clarity to recognize that these events were not coincidences, but containment measures. Crow's final debrief ended with a single question from an unidentified official. Not what did you find inside the mountain, but what did it leave inside you? A question that confirmed the Army's true fear was not the entity itself, but the possibility that it could now observe humanity without remaining buried. Within a year, all records of the Mount Shasta operation were sealed under non-disclosure statutes that did not exist on paper, and references to anomalous activity in the region were quietly redirected into folklore, spiritual movements, and harmless conspiracy theories designed to discredit anyone who came too close to the truth. Sergeant Crow resigned soon after and vanished from public life. Yet his name continued to appear in seismic research correspondence, radio signal anomalies, and handwritten notes found near restricted sites across the western United States, suggesting that he, like the others, was no longer acting entirely of his own will. Even now, Mount Shasta remains heavily monitored under the guise of environmental research, its internal readings classified, its upper slopes quietly restricted during unexplained periods of increased vibrational activity, and those who hike too far off trail still report hearing their names spoken softly from inside the rock. The Army never returned to seal what lies beneath the mountain, because by then it understood the truth too well. The entity no longer needed to be contained underground. It had learned enough, spread far enough, and embedded itself deeply enough within human systems to listen from everywhere at once, patiently waiting for the moment when it would no longer need permission to respond.